Hello and welcome to the Bath Studio School. I'm Evie, Charlotte and Isaac. We are interviewing Fay Whitfield for the Green Party as part of our local council election interviews. Welcome, Fay. So, why is the charge for the clean air coming in?
So we've been given a deadline, if you will, not just by the UK government, by the European government, to clean up our air by 2022.
Like a tariff on the...
Yeah, and if we don't clean up our air by 2022, the local council, that's going to be fined. Now, I highly doubt that they're going to pay that fine themselves, and then that fine is going to be passed on to the residents. So it's important that we have the clean air zone, or we have some kind of measure in place to tackle the dirty air in Bath, the CO2.
How much do we have to change the air pollution in the area?
So we need to cut it by at least half, and that's in terms of nitrous oxide, not necessarily CO2.
Surely you should be doing this with the lorries and more of the substantial transport coming through.
Or change the road layout?
Cars.
Absolutely. So I think Bath is an old city. It's not made for cars, and we're just trying to cram more cars in. And it's made for walking, for cycling, which of course have great benefits other than reducing CO2, but increasing how people are active. One of the things that needs to happen with the clean air zone is it can't work on its own. It needs to work holistically, not just in the city centre, but across the city, not just working on reducing cars, but increasing public transport availability. Now, I think the clean air zone, only about 7% of cars are contributing to the dirty air. The rest of it is all lorries, HGVs, buses. So by adapting our buses, by discouraging HGVs and lorries out of Bath, we can make a huge difference without even having to tax residents.
So if you do it with the cars as well, surely that will put everyone out of business by having no one come to Bath, because all the buses will be too busy and no one wants to come into Bath because it will just be
and have to pay for it to come to Bath.
No one wants to do that.
There's already, I can see what you mean, that our big business is tourism. But it's not just necessarily about sticking everyone on a bus. There are other things that we can do, and along with increasing new buses. So one idea that's been put forward is putting a train station in at Bath Ford or Bath Easton that can then act as a park and ride, encouraging the park and rides that we have already. And also making it easier for groups of people who are making consistent journeys to travel. So if we've got a lot of people living in Lock Hall, for example, who work at the RUH over in Weston, making group transport easier for them is a priority as well. So it's got to work holistically.
But isn't building a train station really expensive? Where comes the money from?
I mean, yeah, it's expensive, but you've got to think about things long term. You can't think short term. I feel like a lot of what the current local council does is just put sticking plasters on things, and that's what the clean air zone is.
Short-sighted instead of looking at the big picture.
So yeah, short term train station is it's a bit of a cost, but long term,
it's an investment.
It's an investment, absolutely. So a lot of people are getting health problems from rising CO2. Asthma, heart and lung conditions. These are costing the NHS money. By decreasing the poisonous air in Bath, we are decreasing the strain on NHS, which is saving us money, which we can then put into the train station.
Personally, you don't drive. Does that contribute into you putting this in forth, because it won't necessarily impact you?
So actually, I do drive.
Oh, sorry.
I do drive. I don't drive often, though. I only drive when I really need to. Most of the time, I'm lucky enough that I can walk into town, and I do. It does impact me in a way. The only time I drive is to go to university, and I only go to university 1 day a week. I don't need to go through the clean air zone to go to university, but I go through the clean air zone to pick up people on my course to then drive them to university, and they would otherwise take cars, so that's saving some CO2 on that way. If the clean air zone was to come in, I'd probably just have to negotiate where I pick them up. But the clean air zone, it's still not set in stone. It's going to happen because we need to do something by 2022. But the rules around the clean air zone aren't set in stone. And we have a couple of things that we want to sort of put in place. is where the clean air zone boundaries are. Is that beneficial, or is it going to make a rat run out of all of the boundaries around it?
What are some of the ideas to change it?
So at the moment, the clean air zone runs midnight to midnight. That could be a problem for people who are working night shifts, especially if they drive to work. They're going to have to end up paying for 2 days, and especially NHS workers. So one of our propositions is 4 a.m. to 4 a.m. the next day, which is a bit more in line with night shifts.
Yeah.
At the moment, also, there is a sliding scale. So the more your car pollutes, the more you pay. And then the less your car pollutes, the less you pay. Now, that's slightly problematic in that older cars pollute more. People who are less economically well off won't necessarily be able to afford to get rid of their old cars and change for a newer, cleaner one. So it's slightly discriminatory. So we want to introduce a flat fee so that it doesn't discriminate. Obviously, we don't want more polluting.
What does the flat fee entail?
So that means when you're entering the clean air zone, no matter if you've got an old car or a new car, it pollutes a little, pollutes a lot, just a flat fee.
Yeah.
And also, that needs to be accompanied by schemes that can help people who can't afford to get newer cars to get that. There were scrappage schemes in the past nationally that have now finished. You could use a model that's very similar, but it's not people's fault that they can't afford to get a newer, less polluting car.
Yeah. So, completely different question. Why are so many schools in Bath closing?
Why are so many schools in Bath closing? I know that there's been a couple of changes since I left school about 10 years ago, which is scary. We're also seeing a lot of academies as well. I feel there's not enough education money going into education. If you look at us compared to other European countries, the amount of money we make as a percentage spent on education is getting smaller and smaller each year. You might see politicians saying, yes, putting this much money into schools, but as a percentage, it's going smaller and smaller and smaller. Thus, we're having to congregate our resources, and that's why we're seeing less schools. People are sort of squishing their resources together, and that doesn't necessarily make for a productive education system. And I'd rather see more mixed gender schools, more variety of specialist schools, and more schools like this that are actually giving you practical skills rather than just the solid book learning.
Yeah, the normal curriculum. Yeah, so looking more at like individual skills, like looking at the students as like more individual like people instead of giving them a set curriculum.
Yeah. So I was a product of Tony Blair's education system, which was everyone's going to go to university, every single person. Which doesn't make for a varied and diverse and skilled workforce. So I came out of university with, great, I've got a degree, I've got a certificate to say I'm smart, but I've got no skills whatsoever. I was completely unemployable, just like loads of other people coming out of university. You had to really work hard to get those skills and get a job a career, really. So we need a lot more diversity in what we're teaching, how we're teaching it, to give people actual skills that they can use. We're seeing more and more people who are immigrants leaving the country, Brexit, and that is leaving a huge gap in our workforce that we currently don't have the people educated or skilled right to fill, and it's going to be a detrimental effect on this country.
So for 16 and younger people, you want them to have a voice in the vote?
Absolutely.
What are your views on like younger voters, and do you think they'll be mature enough to
votes for 16-year-olds, votes for 13-year-olds, definitely.
13-year-olds.
13-year-olds. So there's 80. Oh,
sorry, I'm interrupting. But if you don't learn in school how the pollution is working, how you're supposed to vote.
Exactly, and this is a problem. And you can never fix one problem with one solution because everything is interlinked. So by not educating our young people in politics and how politics works, you're effectively keeping people ignorant. When people are ignorant, they don't care. They don't look into things. And that's how a lot of politicians like to keep the status quo. So if we keep the educated, older people voting, they'll vote for us. If we teach younger people or more people about politics, they might realise what we're doing is not necessarily great. They might vote against us. So the decisions that we're making now, so decisions that we're making on climate change, decisions that we're making on education, they are not going to affect the 88-year-olds that are now voting. The decisions that we make on Brexit are not going to impact the 88-year-olds. they are going to impact you guys. So you should have a say in it. You are no less citizens than anyone who is over the age of 18. And in some countries, you can legally have sex
I think
at 13.
I think some people's arguments for it, though, is like that the younger you are, you generally, even if sometimes you're educated, you're either not mature enough or you're just not as informed. Because when I was 13, like, I wasn't the brightest 13-year-old, but I probably, even if I was, I don't know if I would have been as interested in politics. I would have probably been more interested in, is that video game coming out?
Yeah.
So how are we gonna make it appealing towards young people and get them interested?
What really annoys me about politics is the overly complicated language they use to explain really simple things. I would like to say that I'd introduce, or I'd like to see in schools, politics taught alongside within PHSC. PHSC. Gosh, it's not that long, Fay. Within PHSC, and it is there to a degree, but no one explains the political system. I remember when I was in school in 2008, and Obama got elected. One of my friends did a presentation on the American elections. I just thought, she's so smart. She understands all of this. Completely over my head. But she was 14, 15, and she'd managed to dissect it all. It's just having the tools available. So if we are going to have votes for younger people, we need to have those tools alongside it to sort of help them grapple with the decisions that they're making.
Yeah.
But I think it's absolutely essential. It's democratic because you are no less citizens. At 16, you can go into the army, you can have sex, you can get married. So why can't you vote?
That's a good question. So you said loads of stuff about Brexit. What's your personal opinion? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I personally voted Remain because it gives us so many benefits. And especially when I went to university in Cornwall, my university is pretty much wholly funded by the European Union. But saying that, I can see how the vote happened and why the vote happened and the result.
It was a very close vote.
It did. It was a close vote, but I can see and I can sympathise with why some people voted to leave. The EU does give us some restrictions on things like importing solar panels, actually. And I can see how there was a lot of xenophobic and racist bias behind some people's vote to leave. But if you unpick that, you can see that it's not the EU's fault. It's our fault in the way that we've been governed. But you can see how people have been made to think that way, or how that sort of decision has come to them. So I may have voted Remain, but I don't want to incite or be part of anything which is nasty towards those who voted Leave. And I think it's actually highlighted a really big division in this country, a really big problem of polarisation, which I think has to be dealt with before we can leave the EU. Otherwise, well, we're not going to get a deal. We're not going to get a deal that everyone's happy with. And that will just lead to further polarisation.
Yeah. A different question as well. You're thinking about building some more houses at the Avon Football Club. I've read about. Is that because... Why is that because...
Okay, so I'm not building the houses.
No.
Someone called Aaron Banks is building the houses, who was the main person who funded the Leave EU campaign. He's very good friends with Nigel Farage. So he is building 6 luxury homes by the Avon Football Club. They're going to cost around £1 million each.
Yeah.
Wow.
And yes. And they have been specifically marketed for Londoners. It's just off the A46, which leads to the motorway to London. Good day, you can do it in about an hour and a half, which is still too long to commute for me. But I'm against the house building because luxury homes is not what we need. We have plenty of luxury homes that are coming out of our ears. We need more social housing. You can see how many homeless we have in the city centre. We need social housing. We need affordable housing because I'm still living with my parents and I don't want to be. We need housing which is carbon neutral. There is, the wish list is so much longer, and 6 more luxury homes specifically for Londoners is right at the bottom. Yeah. Out of all the new housing that was built in Bath last year, 45% was bought by Londoners.
But isn't that when you bring Londoners into Bath, isn't that against the clean air zone? When you bring more people into Bath and they have cars if they can afford luxury homes.
Yeah. So these particular luxury homes are outside the clean air zone, but
Okay.
it's still polluting. I suppose it's on the. They could get the train. It's on the train, and then you get a little bus back to number 3. But the point is that it's driving people who are from the area and want to live in the area out. I mean, you could put in an argument for sort of social movement, but the thing is, Bath and the kind of Londoners that are coming over are a very similar demographic to the people living in Bath. You know, we're getting rich Londoners coming over. We're getting the Chelsea and the Fulham Londoners coming over. We're not getting anyone that's bringing anything to Bath. We are not becoming more diverse as a result of this. It's just becoming richer and whiter and more middle class. And diversity, you know, you learn about biodiversity in school and how that helps life to thrive. It's the same in a social makeup. So we don't need more luxury housing. We've got plenty of it. We have plenty of Londoners. And the thing with the Londoners moving to Bath is they will work in London and stay in Bath weekends, holidays. These houses are empty 2/3 of the time. And how wasteful is that when we've got people sleeping on the streets?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's just, it's not a priority.
What would your wish for those homeless people? Like, do you have a wish they can go for?
Homes.
Yeah.
Homes. Yeah.
Well,
homes.
it's interesting that it's been proved that, you know, building homes doesn't necessarily get people off the streets. If you look at Cardiff, where my best friend lives, we have lots and lots of people sleeping on the streets in tents. You go around the corner into the main shopping area and it's like you're walking into a festival. The streets are lined with tents. But Cardiff Council have built enough homes. So you've got to think, okay, well, why are they not going into the homes? Some of the people that are sleeping on the streets, they might be able to go into a home or have shelter, but why aren't they? And that comes down to a systematic overview, really. You can't just build homes. You've got to look at something like the universal credit system, for instance, that just made people homeless. Yes, they might be able to get into a home, but universal credit might mean that they have to work when they can't, or they can't work when they can. We need to look at their family structures. They might be running away from someone. They might be avoiding someone. You know, pinning them down to one location in a home might make them more of a target. It's a really complex issue, but building homes isn't just it. It needs a whole systematic overview. You can't think small. You've got to think big. Everything's interlinked.
Yeah.
All right. So I have some more questions. Do you have plans for the drug issue in Bath? So the small drug issue. Do you have plans or something?
Yeah, because there was a death recently. I think what she means is I didn't know there was, but apparently there's like a drug issue in Bath because there was a death recently, a young man, and I just. What do you want to know? Like,
what's happening next?
The plans are to kind of like tackle, like,
Drug
drug use.
Well, I can't speak for any other parties, but sort of my point of view and the Green Party's point of view is we want to move towards more legalisation, but also more importantly decriminalisation. We don't know, and this is something that really annoys me about politics, people assume they know people's motivations for things. I always like to have hardcore evidence and ask the experts, ask the people who are actually doing it.
Yeah.
And we want decriminalisation because you don't know why people are doing it. You don't know that they have no other job options. But by legalising it, you can then legislate it and you can then regulate it. I think anyone who thinks, just because it's illegal means that people aren't going to do it, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, because it makes it a lot safer.
It does. Well, you can then regulate it. You can then control the flow of it. You control sort of who gets access to it and who doesn't get access to it. Whether those are people sort of more in need or less in need. And it makes more sense, and then we can keep an eye on people who are at risk of drug overdose.
Like,
and then we know who those people are.
Like, because things like needle exchanges and that have like caused like big impacts in a positive way, but a lot of people were against it.
Yeah.
How would you? I don't know. I didn't recall. what would you say to someone who wouldn't be so inclined for like legalisation and decriminalisation? Are there any?
Like I just said, if you think just because you've made it illegal doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
No.
And it's our when you've deaths. Okay, so drugs haven't been legal for a very, very, very long time, and the deaths have not necessarily slowed down. What does that tell you? If you can't keep sort of doing one thing and expecting it to work. It's the definition of idiocy. Only when you try something different, you can then measure the results, and you can make an educated, informed guess from there. But drugs have been banned for a very, very long time, and the deaths aren't stopping. So what's the alternative?
Okay,
I've got no more questions.
Me too. Do you have any questions, Ollie?
I just turned up.
Okay,
My motto in life.
Then thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you, Fay Whitfield, and thanks for watching. This has been Bath Studio School with local council election meetings.